Welcome back to the Joy of Vinyl. I'm Rick Coste. Today we are going to take a brief look at a magic box. This one right here. No, I'm kidding. It's really not this box. It's what's inside this box. This little guy is a preamp. Now it's not the most expensive preamp, but it does its job fairly well. Now preamps come in all shapes and sizes and hit many different price points. Some are solid state and some are driven by tubes. Now we won't address the whole tubes over solid state argument or opinion fest. That's for another day. But we will look at what they do and why. Imagine living in a world devoid of color. Everything is black and white. The sky is light gray instead of blue, and a flower-filled field is simply a mix of different shades of gray with splashes of bright white. Would you know you were missing something? You wouldn't. Not until you saw your first rainbow. At that moment, everything would change. All you would want is a world full of color. And then, one day, you are presented with a little device that you can plug in, which takes the dull gray sky, amplifies the color spectrum, and turns everything blue. This is exactly what a preamp does with sound. It takes a weak, thin, and tinny sound and turns it into something exceptional. And it's all about millivolts. 1 to 4 millivolts to be precise. That's the strength of the signal produced by a turntable's cartridge. The cartridge itself doesn't receive any power when you turn your turntable on. The electricity, when you plug it in and turn it on, is for the motor which spins the platter. As the stylus tracks the groove, it vibrates, and these vibrations are converted into a weak electrical signal. If you were to then plug your turntable into a pair of speakers without using a preamp of any kind, the sound produced would be barely audible, if at all. It would be just like a world without color. So what does all this mean? It basically means that the signal produced by the cartridge requires two things for you to enjoy your record collection. 1, a signal boost, and 2, equalization. A good, well-engineered preamp will do both. It will take that 1 to 4 millivolt signal and crank it up to 300 millivolts. That takes care of number 1, that signal boost problem. If it didn't do number 2, the equalization, you would hear music, but it would be missing all depth. Think Sting's bass. If you were listening to the Police's Outlandos D'Amour album, it would come across as an experiment in high-end cacophony. Now, to combat this, the preamp applies an equalization curve established by the RIAA. That stands for Recording Industry Association of America. You don't need to remember that, just remember RIAA. So this equalization will scale back the high frequencies and boost the lower ones. All of this talk about what a preamp does might make you a bit worried. How do you avoid living in a black and white world, and how do you even know that you're missing something? Do you have to buy yet another piece of equipment when you bring home that beautiful new turntable? Well, maybe not. Many turntables are built with internal preamps, and that negates the need for you to stress over it. It's pretty much plug and play. When you buy it, it should tell you whether or not it has an internal preamp. If it doesn't, you'll either need an external preamp or a receiver with an input labeled phono. You might be wondering now, why don't all turntables come with internal preamps? Why leave it up to you to worry about? Well, it's because a lot of companies are building turntables for two types of consumers, the casual listener and the die-hard vinyl enthusiast. So this is where I dive into the deep end of my personal opinion of the whole thing. It's why you're here, right? To listen to me go on and on about stuff that most people don't care about. I'm also sure you're not here to hear a bunch of cold, hard, boring facts about boosting signals to 3 billion millivolts or equalization curves stamped approved in the 1950s. You want to know if you should buy that turntable with a built-in preamp or not. So I'll say this. If you have a few extra dollars to spare, I would recommend going with an external preamp. I thoroughly enjoyed my last turntable. It was an AT-LP5, which had an internal preamp, but it always bothered me to have all those mechanics present beneath the hood. Now, I love simplicity. It's why I moved to a belt-driven model without an internal preamp. Less, for me, is better. When I purchased my U-Turn customized turntable, I went with an external preamp, and I went with theirs, which was the Pluto 2. Now, if you're all about convenience and not cluttering up your space with yet another piece of equipment and cables, go with the internal preamp. You won't be disappointed. If you endlessly worry about sound and how it can be improved, go with the external preamp. If you want the best of both worlds, look for a model with a built-in preamp that has a shutoff switch and use an external preamp at a later date. And speaking of later, it's time for me to go. So if you enjoy vinyl records as much as I do, feel free to subscribe. And if you want to know when new episodes are released, click the little bell icon down below. And until next time, please take care of yourself and enjoy your records.